everybody, and welcome to the keynote session from Sandy Hook to Choosing Love for our SEL Day webinar, Parents Equip Our Kids. And happy SEL Day. This is a big day. You may not know this, but today we received a presidential proclamation from President Biden and First Lady Jill supporting SEL Day, as well as the governor of California. I know other governors have weighed in too, so I think this is it's been a great day. For you just joining us, I'm Matthew Spohr. I'm the Director of Marketing for the nonprofit Equip Our Kids. We advocate for social emotional learning in schools and in homes. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can submit questions in the chat box. Everybody else, since we're on multiple platforms, feel free to live post your reactions to this session on your favorite social media platform and use the hashtag SEL Day. If you want to help get more SEL into schools, you can text the word equip to 707070 and make a donation. Without further ado, let's get to this banner session. We have David Adams, who is a dad. He's the CEO of Urban Assembly, and he's also the co-founder of SEL Day. And he'll be interviewing Scarlett Lewis, mom and chief movement officer for the Jesse Lewis Choose Love movement. So David, please kick us off.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for the introduction. As you talked about today is International Social and Emotional Learning Day. We're talking about finding common ground, pursuing common good. And I'm so excited to be here with Scarlett Lewis. And Scarlett is a friend of mine. We've met through this space here today. And our friendship is based on the power of social and emotional learning to connect folks to each other and turn pain into purpose. Scarlett, it's wonderful to be here with you today. I'm really excited to learn about your SEL journey. As you know, I'm CEO of Urban Assembly. We've been focusing on SEL for a long time and students, but I'd love to learn a little bit about how you've come to social and emotional learning and the importance of social and emotional learning in turning pain into purpose.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Congratulations on all the progress that you've made. It's fantastic. It's fantastic for our kids and ourselves and our communities and our homes. I started my SEL journey about 9 years ago, and it's a pretty dramatic story, but my 6-year-old son, Jesse Lewis, was murdered in his first grade classroom at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And he had written a message on our kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died. He wrote 3 words: nurturing, healing, love. And I kind of looked at everything a little bit differently than maybe others. I felt compassion for the shooter. He was a recent graduate of the school system, and I knew that he had really suffered isolation and bullying, had few coping skills. Then I see this message on the kitchen chalkboard saying nurturing, healing, love. And I thought, wow, could this just be it? If he had known how to give and receive nurturing, healing, love, the tragedy would never have happened. It seems so simple to me. Simple isn't always easy. And I was introduced to a doctoral professor, Dr. Chris Cook at Western Connecticut State University. And I said, how do I get nurturing, healing, love into schools? I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And he said it's called social and emotional learning. That's so interesting because I had never heard of that before. I had 2 sons, a single mom, worked full time, and wasn't really involved in the school. And I started researching about it. And I thought, wow, these are incredible life skills, like knowing how to have healthy and meaningful relationships and connections, how to manage our emotions, how to make responsible decisions, how to grow through difficulty. And I don't have these skills and tools. I was a college graduate, did a little bit of everything as a single mom to support my boys, but I was not socially and emotionally intelligent. So I started creating programming, lifespan programming, because this can benefit all of us, and learned these skills and tools as an adult. And I can tell you that they changed my life. And ever since then, I've been advocating and really my life's goal is to get social and emotional learning in front of every child.
Well, I mean, Scarlett, one of the reasons why I think you and I connect, it's because it's also my life goal to get social emotional learning in front of every child. Um, and you talked about this notion of isolation, this notion of compassion, and it must be difficult to really take the perspective of some person or person who's taken so much away from you. Um, and can you tell me a little bit about what it means to take the perspective of another person, um, who may cause a lot of pain? I think in our society today, we struggle to really think about what perspective taking means, right? We take the perspective of those who agree with us, and we just try to shut out those who don't. But I heard you say that you really tried to understand how this happened. So can you just tell me a little bit more about what perspective taking means to you and how you've come to that skill and value?
Yeah, it's interesting, David, because initially there was a lot of blame, finger pointing, fault finding, and a lot of the blame went towards the shooter and his mom. And of course, they are responsible. But I also knew that hurt people hurt people. And I wondered how he got to that point. We know that we're born gravitating towards love, and we have to learn to hate. So how did that happen to this young person? And so I got curious, really, and I started finding out information, asking what happened to him instead of what is wrong with him, and realized that there was just many stories of pain and loneliness that he had endured. And I wanted to not also allow him to have control over my thoughts that impact how I felt and then would impact me going forward. And so I did that through forgiveness. And some people didn't understand that, but for me, it enabled me to take my personal power back. And then beyond that, work using what I've learned to help solve the problems that we're seeing in our schools that then translate into homes and communities and vice versa. And the amazing thing is that service piece, that taking what I learned through my painful experience, that learned experience, which is actually, I think, the definition of wisdom, and using it to help other people is how I'm healing.
I keep thinking about this notion of nurturing, healing, love, right? And you just talked about healing by finding love for yourself, finding love for folks who have caused pain in the world. And you talked about this notion of taking and reclaiming your direction, your trajectory in life, by finding how to help heal others in the world, right? And that's how you came to SEL. And I've been thinking a lot about the pandemic, Scarlett, and while your tragedy is a unique tragedy in its depth, the pandemic stressed and caused a lot of pain in our communities. And so what from your experience do you think you can offer to folks who really struggled through the pandemic in the context of social emotional learning? What can we offer those who also felt pain during that time?
And are still feeling pain. I think we're all still feeling the pain of isolation, and loneliness, and the difference in our world, and having this kind of low level, sometimes high level anxiety. It is very uncomfortable. For the first time in my life, we are all out of our comfort zone. We've never been in a place like this before. But the upside of that, there's always a silver lining, is that we're in our growth zone.
Mm.
And so I think that shifting our perspective from focusing on the problems, how the difficulty that we face, how our lives have changed, what has been taken away, to what we still have,
Yeah.
What are the positives that came out of this? I mean, I had to do that practice and still do that practice every day, all day long. People talk about doing it in the morning, maybe, and at night, and listing 3 things. I tick off gratitudes all day long. We have so many thoughts every day, and because our brains want to keep us safe, we gravitate towards negativity. And all we need to know is that we can only focus on one thought at a time. So we can use gratitude to shift our thoughts and to a more positive place. And I do that all day long. And I think that that's a really important practice. That the understanding also that pain is actually an opportunity for growth.
Mm.
There is a term called post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
That is when we grow through difficulty. And actually, it's what the vast majority of us experience after we've gone through trauma and difficulty, roadblocks, challenges in our lives. But because of the way that we're sometimes wired, we focus on the negative when really there's so much positive that can come out of difficulty. So I think taking a moment and taking a brave breath, that's what we call it, to face what is going on in your life and asking yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow through this? And of course, that was a really difficult question to ask myself after my son's murder, but there was a lot there. And there always is. And I mean, even the pandemic, for me, the silver lining of the pandemic has been the focus on social and emotional learning. Look, for the first time, we got presidential recognition. I've been trying to get that for 9 years now. And you did it, David. Yes. But that's the silver lining, because our kids are suffering so much. And really, I think the number one solution is teaching them essential life skills and coping skills that can enable them to grow through this and not be taken down by it.
Well, Scarlett, speaking of gratitude, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the person that you bring to these spaces, for the ability to take your story and lift other people up with it. There's something about being in relationship with you that just makes my day a little bit better. And I just want to say thank you for that. And I know we're all working on our social and emotional skills, and I'm always working on my relationship skills. Tell me a little bit more about the social and emotional skills that you're developing and have developed, and what does it mean to be consistently kind of developing yourself throughout the lifespan, as we talked about before, and how does your program support that work?
I think it really boils down to just staying curious. Things happen, and friends go through difficulty. You've got friends who have kids that are going through difficulty, and just staying really curious and constantly expanding your base of knowledge, because there's so much research that's coming out all the time. And just for me, we have a powerful formula that we focus on. And that can lead you to thoughtfully responding with love in any situation, circumstance, or interaction. And that powerful formula starts with courage. And so these are the things that I practice every single day. Courage, science tells us, is like a muscle. We have to practice it to strengthen it. And of course, we know how much courage our lives take every day. Even sometimes getting out of bed and putting our best foot forward takes a lot of courage. The courage to do the right thing and not the easy thing. The courage to face the challenges in our lives instead of resist and avoid them, or maybe numb ourselves. The courage to choose a grateful thought over an anxious thought. The courage to expand our friend group. The courage to help someone. I mean, the list goes on, and we can practice our courage to strengthen it. And then we've talked about gratitude. That's our second on our list. That we call it the great mind shifter. So important. I told you I tick those off every single day. And then forgiveness is another big one. I've already touched on that, but we found that a lot of adults really still think that forgiveness is a gift that you give someone else who hurt you, who doesn't deserve it. And the reality is forgiveness is a gift, and this is based on decades of research, by the way, a gift that you give yourself. It benefits the forgiver. And in my case, it was the only way that I could take my personal power back. It was freedom from living my life with anger and resentment. And I did not want to live that way. And I had a surviving son who was 12 years old at the time. And I knew that I needed to model a positive way forward for him. And forgiveness was it. It is so powerful. And the amazing thing is, it's the favorite character value for kids. Kids love it. They call it a superpower. They say it feels so good to let it go. And then the last character value that we focus on, that I focus on in my life, is compassion. And we call it compassion in action, because compassion has two components. There is the identifying of a need component, and then the action component. And that's really kind of what sets it aside, it makes it different from empathy. We hear a lot about empathy, and empathy is necessary in relationships, but when you practice empathy, you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes and you're feeling their pain. And that lights up the same receptors in your brain as physical pain. It's a painful process. And we hear a lot today about educator burnout and fatigue in the education world and in the medical world. And really, when you're talking about compassion, there is no such thing as compassion burnout. Compassion, when you practice it and you're mindfully aware of the benefits, actually strengthens you. It can elongate your life. It helps your immune system. It releases oxytocin. It's actually empathy burnout and fatigue. And I think that that's a really, really important thing for everyone who's listening to hear. I just came back from South by Southwest education conference and was giving a talk on overcoming educator fatigue by choosing love, and talked about that very same formula and the difference between empathy and compassion. Really important, because educators have compassion in action in their job description, and they practice that every single day. So in reality, every day, every time that they make a connection with a child in a compassionate way, they are helping, healing, and strengthening themselves.
Let's take a second to look at this. You talked about courage, like a muscle, something that needs to be practiced to develop. You talked about gratitude, right? Being able to feel grateful, to take stock of the blessings that we have. You talked about forgiveness, being able to heal yourself, right? To give yourself grace through giving the grace to others, and then compassion and action. And these things, they sound straightforward. Why are we struggling in the world to live these concepts out, right? To be courageous, to find gratitude, to see ourselves and activate grace and forgiveness and compassion. What's holding us back as a country, as a community, as young people, as teachers, from living out these values?
That is such a great question. Isn't that the $1 million question?
It is.
Because you're saying, oh, this just sounds so easy. But it's not. And it's funny. It's funny, David, because I used to say, hey, it's a formula, you just practice it and do it. But, now I'm saying it's not easy. I don't know why we think that happiness, we're entitled to that.
Right.
Nobody tells us, though, that it's so difficult, that every single day you have to work at it. You have to get up, and the first thing in the morning is practice gratitude. It's discipline, it's effort, but it totally pays off. I mean, the other side of the coin is anxiety and depression, perhaps, and substance abuse, and even worse. So it takes a lot of work. And it takes having these skills and tools. I mean, this is what our life's work is, David, yours and mine, is getting these essential life skills in front of children. I really think that is the game changer. And I know for myself, I know that would have saved my son's life. And I say that with, my heart just wide open, not just my son, but the 19 first graders that died alongside him, as well as the shooter. And it would have, reduced and prevented so much of the suffering that we've seen so far. I mean, it extends beyond, obviously, school safety, because social and emotional learning is the number one way to have a connected, compassionate, loving culture of a school. And when you have that in your school's culture, that can reduce and prevent a grievance. That is the thing that escalates into an attack when you look at the pathway to violence. So really, this is the number one way to have a safe school. It's important to harden, unfortunately, because we've had 350 school shootings since Sandy Hook Elementary 9 years ago. So it's important to harden, unfortunately, but the most important part of school safety is the culture and social and emotional, having a full social and emotional learning program that's embraced by all and just really in the very fabric of the school as a priority is the number one way to have a great culture. And so it's working it. And it's not just like a program like, oh, let's bring this. Okay, we're gonna have some lessons right now, but then we're gonna put it away and we're gonna do something else. It's in the fabric of everything that you do. And I know this because I practice this every single day. So it's a little part of everything that I do. It's a little part of every interaction that I have, every word that I write. I'm practicing my social and emotional intelligence.
It's so interesting you say that, Scarlett, because I really get the sense that you are modeling and living the values that you put out, right? This is not something like a poster to you. It's really something that is the core of how you've chosen to take the trajectory of purpose. And it's not always easy for educators. You talked about compassion fatigue, or excuse me, empathy fatigue at South by Southwest, right? Some folks, I think, they get into the field of education and they think my job is to take content from my mind or from a textbook and deliver it to a child. But so much of this is the compassion. So much of this is the courage to see kids, to create environments where kids see themselves. So I just wanted to get the sense of modeling. How can we work with our educators to really understand the importance of modeling, given all the constraints that they have in terms of curriculum and timing, and the principals coming to see me, and the regents are coming in New York City? Tell me about this notion of modeling and how we support our educators to do that for themselves and for young people.
Is so important, David, because educators have the most important job in the entire world. And I'm talking as a parent. We give them our most precious asset for the majority of the day and help to ask them to help shape and mold them into the human beings they're going to become. But they're also responsible for grades and test scores. And there's been such a focus on that when teachers start incorporating social and emotional learning, they say that it reminds them of why they became teachers. Why do you become a teacher? It is because you're going to have a room full of open hearts and open minds that you can influence. And this whole concept of modeling for me started because I knew that I was going to have to model for my surviving son, who was 12 years old, how to navigate these really difficult waters after this national tragedy. And I wanted us to have a good life. And I knew that I would have to show him. He was watching me. And as every student is their teacher, and every child is their parent, watching everything that you do. every word that comes out of your mouth, every facial expression, every gesticulation, even your energy. This is how we communicate. We only communicate, I think it's 40% with words. The rest is with everything about us. And, you know, we may think that we go into the other room and have a secret conversation, but kids hear everything. And when you have an awareness that you are modeling in the moment how these kids are going to learn to get through any situation, it helps you rise to the occasion and be the best version of yourself. And I can say that because I did that. I practiced being present before Jesse's murder. And so, you know, it's easy to be present when you're at your birthday party, a little bit harder during conflict and tragedy, but that's when you really want to be present so you can thoughtfully respond. And that's when I realized, wow, right here, right now, I'm teaching the important lessons. And so I need to be the person that I want my older son to be. And it really helped me be the best version of myself. And educators can do that too every single day in their classrooms.
I appreciate that so much, Scarlett. We're going to get into some questions and answering. But one of the things before we get to some of our audience questions is that I often say I don't necessarily have the strength for my own self to be the best version of myself. But when I think about my kids, Elijah and Isaiah, and what they believe and who they believe I am, that gives me the inspiration to get better every day. So I really resonate with what you talked about there in terms of like presence and what does it mean to model these pieces so that your son can see what it means to move through pain in a constructive way. So let me come up into the questions here. So the first question is from an attendee, Matt, and he wants to learn about the change that came from adding SEL into school. So let me start with this, Scarlett, and then I'll turn it over to you. So here at the Urban Assembly, we have 23 schools in New York City and support SEL across the country, including SEL Day. And we started this journey about 7 years ago, where we really came into the focus of social and emotional dimensions of learning. And so what we see in our schools, not only do we see suspensions reduce, school climate go up, and academics improve, but we see young people who are more comfortable pushing against each other's thoughts. We see relationships develop, and we see young people who are able to overcome challenges, whether that is problem solving in terms of academics, problem solving in terms of relational difficulties. And Scarlett, you said this: when people know that these skills exist, they start to use them a little bit more effectively. So that's a little bit about our story at the UA. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen when folks start to incorporate SEL skills into the schools that you work with and the institutions that you support.
Well, I notice right away a sense of self-confidence and self-esteem, and that's so important in kids to instill. You know, it's interesting because I see that adults struggle with a lot of the same things that middle and high schoolers struggle with when they don't have these skills and tools. And, you know, I mean, I can give you some really dramatic incidences of where I've seen lives transformed and even saved with these self-awareness skills and tools. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing and really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Scarlett, I really resonate. I think once we name these ideas, I think people start to be able to work on them and practice them. And they are practice. You know, I was a little facetious a little earlier when I said courage is easy, right? And forgiveness is what's the big deal? I mean, truly, these are the things that we work on throughout our whole lives and really define what it means to refine our character, refine the social emotional skills that allow us to be in community with each other. So I'm very resonant with the things that you said there. And we actually have another question, and it's looking at breaking down these SEL skills. So I heard you talk about self-awareness and a little bit about self-management. Can you help us break down these skills so that our audience members know what it is that we're talking about beyond some of these big ideas like courage?
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned curiosity and responsible decision making. What are the other five? Castle has five core components.
We have social awareness, being able
Social
to
awareness
understand perspectives of others.
and self-awareness. I think
Self-awareness.
self-awareness is the most important one, and that's understanding how we're feeling, taking a time out every day to check in with ourselves. How many times do you do that? You just get to the end of the day and your gas tank is empty. But if you had checked in during the day, you might have had an opportunity to say, oh, I am feeling a little anxious. Why am I feeling anxious? Getting curious about it. Oh, David just said something to me and it triggered me. It made me angry. Well, wait a minute. I need to take some time and I need to think about why that was triggering to me. What in my past? Why does that make me angry? We know that anger never happens in a vacuum. There's always an underlying feeling. And then you can get to the end of the day and be energized because you have taken those times. Relationship skills. I mean, Harvard University did they're doing a lifespan study now, longest ever study done on human life. And when they were 75 years into it, they found that relationship skills were the secret to happiness.
Yes.
And here's the interesting thing. We're not born with the ability to have the healthy relationships. We have to learn that. So who do we learn from? And yes, we learn from our parents, but not all parents, and here I'm a great example, have great relationship skills. I didn't, because I didn't learn them from my parents. And so we just kind of pass those things down. And we can teach them in school fairly easily. And then you practice them, as you said. And that is really important because I think some people think, wait a minute, relationship skills, that is something that parents teach. And then teachers teach math skills. But
Right.
Here's the thing, kids don't always get them at home. And even if they do, best case scenario, they get all of this at home. We know now that it needs to be reinforced and
Right.
practiced at school.
Right.
So it's practicing all of these things, and then you can drill down deep into each of those particular items.
I mean, Scarlett, this resonates with me in so many ways. I mean, it's not as complicated as the things that you're talking about, but I often lose my wallet in my house, and I've lost it so much that I've wrote a protocol for finding my wallet. And the first thing in the protocol is to stop and breathe, right? Because I often find myself searching in the same place. And then I wrote to myself, it's not a finding, it's not a behavior, it's a thinking strategy, right? Remembering where I put my wallet is a lot more effective than just like searching frantically. And the first step to remembering is stopping and thinking, recognizing my anxiety, my frustration, so I can make a plan. Now, the best plan is to put my wallet in the same place every time, which is the plan that my wife tells me as I'm frantically searching. So, these are the things we learn over time. And so everything from finding your wallet to being in relationship with folks, these are skills.
Yes, absolutely. So important. And thank you for that, because I lose my keys. So I'm going to try that.
I will send you the protocol. It has helped me find my wallet multiple times when I'm trying to rush out the house. So, I'm really inspired by this notion of choice. There's a lot of folks talking about self-care, and you talk about courage. What does it mean to choose? You talked to me a little bit before about numbing, right? And I just wanted to think about this choosing love, choosing courage, and what does it mean to choose things like numbing, choosing things like retrenchment, or choosing things like resentment? How do we overcome some of these challenges so that we can be in relationship with ourselves and relationship with others?
I think the most important thing is to understand that we have a choice, and then to understand what we can choose instead of choosing anger, resentment, frustration, hatred. And some of that comes from how much in control we feel on a day-to-day basis. So when we're operating without a sense of control in our lives.
Right.
We feel like things happen to us. We start out, everything's happening to me, and it's your fault. So you're blaming, finger pointing, fault finding, not taking personal responsibility. And that makes you feel anxious. It makes you feel resentful. It victimizes you, which is the definition of loss of control. And you can feel helpless, hopeless. It can make you angry. And so I see social and emotional learning as a set of skills that brings that locus of control back inside you, where you make things happen. You have the power. Now, of course, we know we can't always choose what happens to us in life. We can't always choose, but we can always choose how we thoughtfully respond to what happens. And you can look at my example, which is pretty dramatic, but I would never have chosen to have my son brutally murdered. However, I could take my personal power back in how I chose to thoughtfully respond. And really, as a foundation of our choices, there are two: love and fear, and everything else goes on top of that. And so when we choose love in our responses, we are in control. And not only are we in control, but we are making the world a safer, more peaceful and loving place by modeling that for other people.
You know, coming back to this choice, Scarlett, me and my children, we do character education every night. And we use a book from EL Education to have quotes. And one of the quotes is from actually my favorite author, is Viktor Frankl. And he talks about this notion of choice, right? And I talked to my kids about this, and in the scene, he says, even in the concentration camps, there were men who gave their last piece of bread. And he said, they're not many, but there were few. And it taught him this notion that the only human freedom that could never be removed, right? Physical restraint and hunger, but the only human freedom was the choice of one's attitude. And I think that we struggle with that in 2022, right? I think we're really invested in what is happening to us, as opposed to how are we reacting to the world. And so I just wanted to present this to you, Scarlett, the strength of choice, right? The strength of resilience, the post-traumatic growth. And I wanted to contrast that with, I think, our current understanding of the world, which is that we don't have those strengths. We can't respond with love. We don't have choice. So I just wanted to offer this to you and get your thoughts on this, right? Like, how do we remind ourselves in the world that we do have choice, and we do have agency, and that's the power of humankind?
We absolutely have choice. I mean, that is where our personal power comes as human beings, in our ability to choose. And then it's where we focus. Where are we going to focus? Our thoughts, which impact every cell in our body based on neuroscience. Where are we going to focus them? Are we going to focus them on fear or love? And I love Viktor Frankl's quote, between stimulus, which is what happens to us in life, and it can be anything that has ever happened to anybody who's listening, and your response, there's a space. In that space lies your freedom and power to choose your response. And that is the present moment. So, you getting into the present moment, where most likely you're safe. We're all safe here because we're watching the Zoom. Get into the present moment and you can choose. You have the ability to choose. But, I do a lot of prison work, and the prisoners, they didn't know that they had a choice. They'll tell you, all I ever knew was anger, hatred, and revenge. And if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you and the ones that you love even more. But just having a 1 hour conversation with them, talking about choose love, they realize, oh my gosh, I can choose a different path. I could have done that. I wish I had known. So everyone has a choice. And a lot of that is simply awareness.
Yeah. Well, Scarlett, on behalf of the Urban Assembly and SEL Day, I want to thank you for choosing to spend time with us. I want to thank you for your courage. I want to thank you for your forgiveness and compassion, for the gratitude that you bring to this space, for SEL finding the common ground, pursuing the common good. And I really appreciated being in relationship with you today. And as we close this off, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt, and he can give her his thanks as well. Thank you, Scarlett.
Thank you, David.
Absolutely. Both of you are amazing, vulnerable, important leaders in this important work, which is great. I know, we're at the end of what for us has been a 4-hour thing. One practice in social emotional learning is checkouts, like how are you leaving class? And so I'm going to ask Scarlett to give everybody here a checkout. Can you share one relationship skill from your program that parents can take home and try with their kids this weekend?
One relationship skill. Yes. Well, I can share, and this is probably not the easiest, but I'm going to talk about forgiveness. They can take a piece of paper, the whole family, and write a time when their feelings were hurt, or maybe they hurt someone else's feelings. Write it down. They can draw it if they don't want to be forthcoming about what it is, or if they're too young to write. You can draw a picture, you can write it out, you can be as detailed as you want. In other words, get all of that pain and hurt out on the paper, and then you practice forgiveness by taking that paper and crumpling it up, doesn't matter what it is, and then throwing it into either a little basket marked self, because you can forgive yourself, or other. And as you throw that in there, slam dunking it, ask, how does that feel? How does that feel? How did it feel writing that hurt down? And then how does it feel to let it go?
Wow, that's great. That's really powerful. Thank you. Thank you. We are just at the end of our time. As we wrap up, I want to remind people, thank you, that recordings of all of these sessions are going to be available at the conclusion of today's program. It'll take us a little while to put them together. You can always find really parent-friendly information on SEL at equipourkids.org. We've got toolkits there that help you do these things with your kid, and also toolkits to help you go talk to your schools so they can look more like David's schools, hopefully one day. And that's it for us. I'm Matthew Spohr from Equip Our Kids. On behalf of all our wonderful presenters, including you, our webinar sponsors, and the National SEL Day sponsors, and people like Dave who helped get this off the ground, thank you for supporting the kids in your life and in your community through social emotional learning.